Welcome to the State Representative District 36B and 40A candidate forums. My name is Joe Paquette. I'm representing the North Hennepin Area Chamber of Commerce, and I'd like to thank you for attending this evening. The North Hennepin Area Chamber and the League of Women Voters of Brooklyn Park, Osseo, and Maple Grove are co-sponsoring this candidate forum to encourage voter interest in the upcoming election on November 6th. Neither organization endorses any candidate for office. We'd like to thank the City of Brooklyn Park for the use of their facility for this forum and CCX Media for their support in televising this event and for their scheduling of the cablecast replays. It is now my pleasure to introduce Kirsten Chomey representing the League of Women Voters.
Thank you. Good evening. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I'd like to welcome you to the Candidates Forum this evening. We're pleased to give you, the voters, this opportunity to get to know the men and women vying for your vote. Our number one goal is the community engagement of informed voters. We're so thankful that you've all joined us. The League of Women Voters is an organization that is nonpartisan and volunteer-based. It is organized at the local, state, and national level to encourage citizens to participate in government. While LWV members do study and take stands on issues, we do not endorse nor support political parties nor candidates. The LWV does encourage its members as individuals, as we encourage each of you to get involved in your community and the political party of your choice. However, the views expressed in this forum are those of the individual candidates and not those of the League of Women Voters. Again, by sponsoring this forum this evening, the League provides an opportunity for citizen participation and exposure to the candidates, but again, does not provide an endorsement of any kind. All viable candidates have been invited to participate this evening, and we have 3 out of the 4 of them here. In tonight's forum, the candidates will start with their opening questions that they all received in advance to prepare for tonight, in which they have 1 minute to speak. Then our candidates will have up to 30 seconds to respond to each of the questions that are coming from the audience. Finally, then they will be given 1 minute for their final statements. Candidates, the League would like to request that you refrain from making any personal attacks of any kind on your fellow candidates. I'd like to take this moment to point out our timekeepers in the front row. They're the ones that actually make you more nervous than me. So they will show you when you have 15 seconds left to respond, and then they will show you when your time has expired. Finish your statement at that time, as I will need to direct the next speaker's turn. With 3 of you, the order has been randomly pre-selected, and you'll just follow my evil chart. Our ushers are handing out cards and pens as needed for your questions, audience, and please raise your hand to receive a card, and then the ushers will collect your questions so that I can ask them to the candidates. Please follow these guidelines as set up by our partnership with the North Hennepin Area Chamber of Commerce. Number 1, the question may not be a personal attack on any candidate. Number 2, the question may not have already been asked, although we may combine similar nature questions so we don't get the same answer all the time. And then also we need to be able to read your writing. That's really important. Otherwise, we can't ask your question. And also at this time, I'd like everyone to silence your communication devices at this time. All of them. Every single one. There we go. I have yet to make it through a forum without somebody's phone ringing. While you're silencing your communication devices, I will introduce. From 36B, we have Melissa Hortman. And Mr. Osseo was unable to be here this evening. And for 40A, I even got that right. Yay. I got Michael Nelson and David True. All right, we'll start with your 1 minute questions. The first one is, please tell us about your background and previous involvement that support your candidacy for this position. First responder will be Ms. Melissa Hortman.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and the North Hennepin Area Chamber of Commerce for hosting this forum. My background is that I grew up in Spring Lake Park in Andover and graduated from Blaine High School and graduated from the Anoka Hennepin School District. Then when my children started school at Monroe Elementary School, I became involved in their education and found that up here in the North Metro, we were fighting to pass school levies, and they were costing our homeowners more than levies cost people in other parts of the state. It seemed to me that more school funding should come from the state so that less would be in our local property taxes. So I got involved in the parent legislative team at the Anoka Hennepin School District, and that led me to run for office. I've also served as a Sunday school teacher at St. Timothy Catholic Church, a Girl Scout leader, and on a couple of commissions in the city of Brooklyn Park prior to becoming elected.
Thank you. Mr. Michael Nelson.
Well, thank you. And again, I also want to thank the Chamber of Commerce and the League of Women Voters for holding this forum. My mother was a longtime participant in that in the League of Women Voters, so this would be near and dear to her heart. I also want to thank the residents of Brooklyn Park for allowing me the honor and privilege of serving them in the Minnesota legislature. This is my home. I grew up here. I lived in Brooklyn Park most of my life. I graduated from Park Center High School and Hennepin Technical College. I participated with my sons in Boy Scouts and in Brooklyn Park Youth. I served as a local Boy Scout leader. I was also active in my Carpenters local and serving in many leadership positions. In the legislature, I've served on many committees. Currently, I've been the lead on the Government Operations Committee. In the role there, I've worked across the aisle to pass common sense election reforms to save money for our local governments while making voting easier for our citizens. The integrity and ease of our election system is paramount to maintaining trust in our governments at all levels. I will continue to do this work on these and other important issues to Brooklyn Park.
Thank you. And Mr. David True.
I want to thank the North Area Chamber of Commerce and the League of Women for hosting this forum and giving us the opportunity to address the residents here. I've actively volunteered for nonprofit organizations in Minnesota and in Georgia. I have worked on a construction team in Uganda and assisted with a food outreach group in South Africa feeding the poor. I've been married for 19 years to my wife, Karen, who is also a teacher at the Robbinsdale School District. I have 4 kids who attend the Osseo School District. I've decided to run for state representative because there are issues that need to be addressed and solved. Tax burden is too high, our schools are having financial troubles, our infrastructure needs repair, and our health care needs to be resolved. I'm seeking your vote that I can work on solving these issues.
Thank you. Our next question. Minnesota's transportation infrastructure is in dire need of funding for repairs and new roads. How would you propose funding road and bridge repairs and new road construction projects over the next 10 years? Our first responder will be Mr. True.
As I said in our last debate, I would not raise the gas tax, as the incumbent stated he would do. Minnesota is the highest tax state. We can fund our roads and bridges by redirecting the funds from the sales tax revenue, like we did 2 years ago. I would also stop the siphoning of the Highway Trust Fund, which is being rated millions of dollars to pay for the light rail project. I think we need a dedicated, stable source of funding for transportation, and I do not believe that comes from increasing the gas tax. We do have the opportunity to dedicate existing taxes on auto repair, auto parts, and car leases. Currently, this money is being used in the general fund. We should set it aside solely for road and bridge repairs. I feel like this would be a good use without raising any taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson?
Well, thank you. And traditionally, we have relied on user fees to fund our roads. User fees such as the gas tax and tab fees, et cetera. And these fees are constitutionally dedicated and cannot be used elsewhere. And there are many people that want to say that our gas tax, the Minnesota gas tax, is being used for transit. It is not. It cannot be by our Constitution. We have also dedicated sales taxes on new car sales to the road fund, and also part of the leased vehicle go there, but also part of the leased vehicle sales taxes go to fund transit in our city, in our town. Parts of our local and county tax, and our city taxes and our county taxes also go to fund our roads. And so there's a mixture of what's paid for them. As was said here, I do support raising the gas tax because, again, it's constitutionally dedicated and cannot be stole out of the fund for other purposes.
Thank you. And Ms. Hortman?
I agree with Representative Nelson on many of the points that he made. What's really important to recognize about Minnesota's transportation system is we're really fortunate to have constitutionally dedicated revenue for our roads and bridges that can only be used for our roads and bridges. In many other states, they don't have this, and they struggle to compete with the school funding and nursing home funding to fund their transportation infrastructure. So Minnesota's in good shape on that front. Where it's more difficult for us is that we have our gas tax frozen at a certain cents per gallon. And so unlike the property tax and the income tax that fluctuate with inflation, the gas tax is static and it relies on policymakers to go in and make inflationary adjustments. We can't buy asphalt to pave our roads or concrete to pave our roads for the same price that we could in 2008 when the gas tax was last passed. And the gas tax does not index itself for inflation. So I think we need to, as Representative Nelson stated, stick with the user fees where the users of the system pay to upgrade the system.
Thank you. Our next question. Do you support further reduction in taxes for residents and businesses? Why or why not? And if so, which taxes would you want to see reduced? First responder is Ms. Hortman.
I think that instead of looking at what the amount of taxes is and saying, do we want to go up or down, what we should really be looking at is, do we have the kind of community that we want to have at a cost burden that we can sustain? And in Minnesota, the price of government, the percent of our income that government uses to support all of our infrastructure has been static or declining in recent decades. So I think none of us want any of our tax dollars wasted. So we should always be looking for where are there things we could cut in government and things that we maybe used to fund that we shouldn't fund anymore, or things that are ineffective that could be made more effective. And then I think we need to look at what is the quality of life we want to have. We can't do a lot of things for ourselves that we can do better as a community. Things like public education, things like a public transportation system, roads we drive on, and clean water to drink, and our public safety, our police and fire. So I think we have to look at, do we have the services we need, and how can we keep that at the lowest possible price?
Thank you. Mr. True?
Yes, I support further reduction of taxes. In most every category in the country, Minnesota is one of the highest taxed. When the state taxes too much, jobs and businesses go elsewhere. We have already seen this in Minnesota, where companies are leaving. Minnesota should be the best place in the country to start a business and for a business to grow. For this to happen, we need to have a reduction in corporate taxes and personal taxes. There has been surpluses since 2013, when Governor Dayton enacted a $2.1 billion tax increase. Additionally, we are one of the 13 states that tax Social Security benefits. I believe all that money from the surplus is better spent in the hands of the taxpayers, allowing families to make their own decision with their own earned money. Tax cuts will allow businesses to grow by expanding jobs, research, development, and equipment. Bottom line is, lowering taxes is the key to economic growth.
Thank you. And Mr. Nelson?
While it's easy and popular to say, I want to cut this tax or I want to cut that tax, we need to be realistic about what our taxes fund. The previous question asked for more funding for transportation, but if we cut taxes and continue to cut taxes, there won't be money there to pay for the roads and the bridges. Unlike the federal government that cut taxes but added 1.3 to 2 trillion, that's $2 trillion to the national debt, we as a state need to balance our budget every 2 years. And so the question should not be what taxes to cut, but what services do we want our government to provide at and what levels we want to provide them at. And then we need to come up with a fair tax system that balances those out, what we want to have funded and what we pay, and design it so that everyone pays their fair share.
Thank you. Our next question. Do you support free all-day pre-kindergarten for every 4-year-old in the state? Why or why not? And if so, how would you like to see this delivered? You have the rest of the question with examples. So, Mr. Nelson, you will start with that one.
Yes, I have supported pre-K for 4-year-olds and all-day kindergarten in the past because it's one way to ensure the success of all our students. There's been a lot of talk lately about the shortage of workers in all sorts of businesses, so we need to make sure that all of our students are successful. I support the current system where we have a mix of public and private schools providing the pre-K. And if we must prioritize, we should concentrate on the students with the most challenges so they can have success in school and again, be successful graduating and entering the workforce for all of us to be successful.
Ms. Hortman?
Well, I agree very much with what Representative Nelson has said. We are far behind the rest of the country in providing 4-year-old preschool. It just galls me that we're behind Wisconsin and that we have to play catch up with Wisconsin on this. And I agree that there are different delivery models. When my kids were growing up, they went to Montessori sometimes, they went to New Horizon. When I was a little girl, I went to Tiny Tots at Park Terrace Elementary School in Spring Lake Park. So there were a mix of options. It's really important for us to have a public school option in places where parents have a really hard time getting enough quality preschool in their area because of the economics. This is particularly true in greater Minnesota. And I agree very much with what Representative Nelson said, that if we have a scarcity of funding, we should focus in on those children who need help the most and direct funding to them.
Thank you. Mr. True.
There are several issues that we need to look at when addressing this. First, if it was 100% funded, would the government then make it a requirement to attend, in which I would not support this. There are several families that don't choose to go down this route, and they choose other options. Second, there are government programs available to help cover the costs for those who can't afford it but want to utilize pre-K. Third, Robbinsdale School District 281 had a $10 million deficit last year. Osseo School District 279 has a projected deficit of $2.7 million this year. We need to solve the funding of our schools and keep them out of the red before making a sweeping change by adding another full grade to our school districts. And just to restate, there is funding available. The state has a scholarship program for children in need and families who need financial services.
Thank you. We're now moving into our questions in which you have 30 seconds to respond and solve the world's problems. Okay. First one. What type of involvement would you like to see from the state in healthcare for its citizens? First responder will be Ms. Hortman.
Well, we know that a lot of families are having trouble these days ensuring that they have affordable and accessible health care, especially if they're in the small business market or the individual market. Many of us who work for large employers, having health care coverage is not a problem. But for those who are in the individual market and the small business market, I think they should have the right to buy into the Minnesota Care program so that we can take advantage of economies of scale and with more people in the pool, keep costs lower for everyone who's in.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson?
I agree with what Representative Hillstrom said. We should allow a Minnesota Care buy-in for those that want to. Healthcare is expensive. There's been a lot of talk about how expensive it is. The last election cycle, there was talk about a family that needed health care and what they listed how much they pay for health care. Well, when I went back to the state where I get my health care from and asked how much did the employer pay in and how much I paid in and added that up for the year, it was about the same as what they were saying about. So health care is expensive. We need to make sure that it's affordable, and again, we need to make sure that everyone's covered.
Thank you. Mr. True?
Can you repeat the question?
Absolutely. Hold on at the timer. What type of involvement would you like to see from the state in health care for its citizens?
As a business owner, specifically in construction, to keep myself in check and other businesses as well, we always gave bids to get the job. If we're too high, then we lost the job, lost the project. So in the same way, to keep the health care affordable, and insurances, we need to open up insurance carriers from across the state and across the country. Allowing more insurance carriers will drop the rate and allow everybody affordable. Being a business owner, my taxes are pretty high on the health insurance.
Okay. All right, let me read this. Next question. Do you support a 1 penny per pill opioid tax? Why or why not? If so, how would you like to see it used to address the opioid crisis? First responder is Mr. True.
I had a brother that passed away a few years ago. He had Crohn's disease, and the doctor allowed him to start, using marijuana, and then that opened the door as a gateway drug to other drugs. And so it has definitely hit my family pretty dramatically. I'm not too specific about the 1 cent tax or anything like that, but I am open to resolving the issues of people that have drug addiction and other type of addictions to, getting the critical help that they need.
Thank you. Ms. Hortman.
I think that the penny a pill proposal that's been discussed at the state legislature is one that ought to be seriously considered in both houses. The Minnesota Senate passed something along those lines off the Senate floor, and the Minnesota House, under Republican leadership, wasn't even permitted to take up the bill and discuss the issue. The pharmaceutical industry has known for a long time that these are highly addictive substances, and they played a large part in getting a lot of people addicted to them. So they should shoulder some of the burden in us attacking this problem and solving it.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson?
Yes, I too support the penny a pill opioid tax that was proposed. Senator Eaton was one of the main sponsors of that in the Senate. And the reason is that the opioid companies, The drug companies are part of the problem. We need to make sure that they pay part of the cost of this, and that money should then go to solving the opioid problem and get people off of the addiction.
Okay. Next question. Do you support an amendment to the state constitution that states only human beings have rights and not corporations or other organizations? Why or why not? First responder is Mr. Nelson.
Yes, I do. That would, the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court ruled that corporations are people, and therefore they have First Amendment rights, and that money is speech, and therefore they can spend unlimited amount of monies on elections. And that's made our elections very costly, not so much on the local level, but you see all the ads that are out there on TV with all the congressional races, that it's really made it terrible to watch TV this time of year because it's all those terrible ads.
Okay. Mr. True?
Repeat the question again, please.
Absolutely. Hold on. I'll grab it again. Do you support an amendment to the state constitution that states only human beings have rights and not corporations or other organizations? Why or why not?
my background is across the tracks, come from a rough family, and then I succeeded, surpassed my family, going to high school, going to college, and being a business owner, I see the benefit of both ways. So it's something that I would have to look at more and study more about. This is not a topic that I'm fully invested in.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hortman?
I would support finding a way to overturn Citizens United. I agree that with Representative Nelson that the corporate presence in our campaign conversations has really made the atmosphere very toxic. It's unbelievable to me over the recent years how much uglier political campaigning has become since corporations were allowed to spend unlimited amounts. And I think since people have votes in our democracy, that people should be the ones having political speech. It's gotten to the point where it's hard for candidates to be heard above all the noise of the corporate advertising.
Thank you. Our next question. Tell us about a place in your district that you have not visited yet but would like to visit before the election. Mr. True.
The Northeast, near the river, that's where I haven't been able to campaign yet and go door knocking yet. But I met several people across the district so far and enjoyed speaking with everybody and listening to the concerns and addressing their needs.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson?
I think in the years that I've been campaigning, I've just about hit every corner of this district. And as I said before, growing up here, it's surprising how it's changed and how much it's the same, but how much it changed in the years since when I was growing up here. But I think I've been in every corner of this district and met a lot of good people in Brooklyn Park.
Okay. And Ms. Hortman?
I was going to say the inside of an LA Fitness or something like that. Seems like a good idea to take up exercise at some point in one's life. But I feel like I've been everywhere in the district as well. I think we are blessed by having a lot of small businesses open up, and we're really blessed by fantastic restaurants. Lemongrass Thai is my current favorite, and I'm sure there's something that's open in the district that I haven't been to yet.
There you go. Next question. What is your position on the Met Council? Should it be abolished, changed, or left alone? First responder is Mr. Nelson.
I support the Met Council for the things that they do. They're who provide our sewer service, they provide our transit system, and they provide a lot of things that cannot be done in either a city by individually in cities or even individual to individual. There's been a lot of talk in recent years about reforming the Met Council, adding elected officials, and there's been a lot of different responses. Twice it's come to votes and bills have been sent to the governors. Governor Pawlenty vetoed it in the past, and Governor Dayton has vetoed changes to it in the past. So we can continue to look at that, but I support the Met Council the way it is right now.
Thank you. Ms. Hortman?
I think we have to figure out a way to have an elected component of it. The Metropolitan Council is an award-winning service delivery entity. When you look across the country, there's really nobody who delivers water and sewer and transit services for as effective a use of the dollar as our Metropolitan Council. However, they do have taxing authority. And because they have taxing authority, I think the people who should serve on the Metropolitan Council should be people who are accountable to the voters and can be voted out of office. Running elections on that scale would be really big districts, so I think we should look at appointing mayors or county commissioners.
Thank you. And Mr. True?
I agree with Ms. Wortman. The Met Council has grown tremendously powerful, and I would revert it back to the original function, which is over water and sewer, and break up the individual components and allow them to operate their individual function. The Met Council needs elected officials and from each representative from each area.
Okay, thank you. How do you plan to reach out to the seniors in your district? First responder is Ms. Hortman.
Well, one of the ways that I reach out to people in the community is sending letters and sending flyers. One of the ways I reach out to seniors in particular, because they tend to have more prescription drugs than others, is to send information on where you can dispose of your excess prescription medications. But another way is to have town hall meetings at the local libraries, which I do often. And I think that the importance of sending out a lot of materials is that people should know who their state representative is so that they feel very comfortable calling that person or emailing that person.
Thank you. Mr. True?
Play croquet with them. Yeah. Years ago, with one of the nonprofits I work with, we went into nursing homes and we read to them. And I'm not sure you're actually addressing these seniors or younger seniors, but those seniors we read to and helped them transition, to the end of their life. But in different phases of that corporation, we would go and speak to each individual in the home and see how they're doing and address their needs.
I hear pickleball is getting popular. You might want to work on your swing. Mr. Nelson?
Thank you. Again, we've held town hall meetings, but one way to meet them is just door knock. I mean, a lot of our seniors live in their homes, and you go out and meet them at where they're at and talk to them about their issues, and that's the way to get to know the seniors and the people in our district.
Thank you. Next question. Should the state of Minnesota create or mandate paid family leave? Why or why not? If yes, how would you like to see it implemented and paid for? First responder is Mr. Nelson.
If we're going to do paid family leave and mandate it, then I think we need to set up a system similar to what we have with unemployment, where their employers pay into it, the employees pay into it as they go, and then when they need to take it, they pull out of that fund that goes there, similar to what unemployment taxes are, that the employers pay into it, and when a person gets laid off, then they collect on that insurance. That's how I see the system working, because there is a cost to it, and that's something we need to look at.
Thank you. Mr. True?
I agree pretty much. I believe that needs to be paid in by the individual. We store vacation time all the time, and so we can store, family leave. I have 4 kids, and so, it would benefit me greatly, spending time with them whenever, even though we're not going to have another baby, but it would help out on vacation.
Okay. Ms. Hortman?
I also agree with what Representative Nelson put forward, having an earned system where folks pay in just a small increment each hour that they work or each pay period that they're salaried, so that when they need it, it's there for them. I think we also have to have different ways that we handle that issue with large and small employers, because it's one thing for a very large company to do without an employee during a leave, and it's quite another thing for a very small business to hire somebody to fill in. And so I think we have to look at making sure whatever we put in place is fair to large, medium, and small businesses.
Thank you. Next question. Will you author a bill to penalize HMOs financially if they refuse auditing? Why or why not? Mr. True?
I would think that would be a great bill. I mean, everybody needs to stay in check, especially healthcare and healthcare providers. I think it's a good way to have a good checks and balances to keep them in check and help keep the costs lowered.
Mr. Nelson?
It's not an issue that I'm really up on as far as HMOs not refusing to be audited, but I think I would support a bill to that effect. We need to make sure that if there are HMOs that people are getting the services they're paying for.
Thank you. And Ms. Hartman?
We've been fortunate in Minnesota that most of our HMOs are nonprofits, and it is the Attorney General's job to make sure that nonprofits are using the dollars in the way that they're intended. So it's my understanding that the Attorney General's office already has the legal right to audit HMOs because they're all, right now, nonprofits in Minnesota. And for any for-profit entity that wants to come in and charge premiums to provide health care, I think their books should be open so that we can make clear that the premiums are in fact paid for medical care at an acceptable rate and not padding somebody's profits.
Thank you. Next question. Regulating nursing homes and elder care facilities is the responsibility of the Minnesota Department of Health. To protect patient safety, would you press federal authorities to intervene in Minnesota to correct our regulatory failure to uphold patient care standards? You know, in 30 seconds, why or why not? Mr. True.
Can you repeat the question?
It's a long one. Here we go. Regulating nursing homes and elder care facilities is the responsibility of the Minnesota Department of Health. To protect patient safety, would you press federal authorities to intervene in Minnesota to correct regulatory failure?
Most likely, I believe that there does need to be a check and balance system where they can be routinely, checked in on and viewed and visited, and make sure that their level of health care is being maintained and that their health is, up to par.
Ms. Hortman?
I don't think we need the federal government in the state of Minnesota, but right now, elder care facilities are not licensed, so there is no license revocation system for a facility that would tolerate abuse or neglect. And so I think we have to look at a system where not just anybody can open up an elder care facility, but they are subject to inspection and licensure. We clearly had a problem in Minnesota where that was not being followed up on, and we really should be taking steps to reform that system.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson?
I agree with what Representative Hortman said, but I also want to add that this gets back to the question about cutting taxes and how we fund government. Those employees that for the state of Minnesota that would go in and regulate those and inspect those are paid from our tax dollars. And if we cut taxes too much and cut services too much, then we set up a problem where we don't have the people to do the inspections that are needed to be done to regulate those facilities. So it's a roundabout question. I also don't think we should bring the federal government into our business.
All right. Our final 30-second question. What is your top transit priority? Mr. Nelson.
I think my top transit priority is the overall system. I think we need to finish Botno as part of the system that we're building out for the light rail and for transit, but we also need to be investing in buses to make sure that we have the connections to the light rail that are there, but the people have connections to where they need to go. Also, one of the big thing that's lacking in our system is suburb to suburb bus service. If I live in Minneapolis, or if I live in Brooklyn Park and I have a job in Fridley and I need to take the bus, currently I have to go downtown and then take a bus back out. We need to come up with some system of funding to help create this more of a spoke type or more of a rim type thing as opposed to the spoke system that we have.
Thank you. Ms. Hortman.
I agree the bus system is really the backbone of our transit system, and I think a lot of us have taken the park and rides at Noble or the Foley Park and Ride, and I think we need to work on that curb system where the bus is off on the shoulder and make sure that there's enough room for the traffic and there's enough room for the bus to be on the shoulder. That really does incentivize people to use the park and rides and to reduce congestion, but I'm concerned that the way that we're building these right now, we're not giving the buses safe enough room on the side so that motorists don't feel like they're about to have their mirror taken off.
And Mr. True.
Along with them, I would reinvest more in buses for mass transit. The light rail for just the Blue Line extension has cost or will cost $1.5 billion for a 13-mile extension. I think it's too expensive. It doesn't benefit enough people to justify the investment. Also, it has been shown to lose money due to the free access of the stations. However, I'm open for discussion if it can be, if the cost can be reduced and the stations can be redesigned.
Okay. All right, we're now going to move into your closing statements in which you have 1 minute to make your final remarks for this evening. In summary, how do you intend to best serve your district and move the state forward? We'll go in the reverse order from where we started. So our first responder will be Mr. David True.
All right, thank you. I believe my experience in real estate and in the construction industry gives me the tenacity to get the things done. All the current issues that Minnesota is facing now is the reason why I chose to run for office. I believe a strong conservative voice is needed. I would like to push to lower taxes, to give our schools the resources to thrive, build and repair our infrastructure, and potentially solve our health care crisis. I just appreciate the time to speak, and I ask for your vote.
Thank you. And just to remind voters that he is running for State Rep 40A, and the other candidate is Mr. Michael Nelson.
Well, thank you. And as we wind down this upcoming election season, we need to make sure we do not get caught up in all the noise that's going on out there. It's still good jobs that pay livable wages and a strong education system that prepare our children to become contributing members of our society are still the most important issues for all of us. I will continue to work across the aisle to make sure we continue to invest in good schools for our children, a comprehensive transportation system that works for everyone. And this includes good roads, quality public transit, so we can get to our jobs, shopping, and the religious institutions of our choice. And public safety, so we can feel safe in our homes and our community. There are not easy answers to these issues, but if we all work together, we can come up with solutions that make our community stronger. It has been my honor and privilege to serve you in the Minnesota legislature, and I ask for your vote on November 6th.
Thank you. And for District 36B, Mr. Osseo, again, was unable to be here this evening, but we do have Melissa Hortman.
Thank you. The most important things I think we need to do to continue to move our district and the state forward are to ensure that we have a world-class education system from preschool all the way through job training. We also need to make sure that healthcare is affordable and accessible to everyone. We shouldn't have a situation where we have a young man who rationed his insulin because his deductibles were too high and passed away. We're one of the richest states and the richest country in the world, and we can afford to take care of each other. It's also much more cost-effective for us to have health care that allows us to do preventative and good maintenance before we get to healthcare catastrophes. Families deserve to have economic security. Anybody who works a full-time job should be able to support their family. They should have a job that they can rely on if they take some time off to care for a sick loved one. And finally, we need to protect our infrastructure system, our water, sewer, our transportation, transition to clean energy, and then statewide broadband so that we can have economic opportunity all across the state.
Thank you. Once again, on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Brooklyn Park, Osseo, and Maple Grove, and the North Hennepin Area Chamber of Commerce, I would like to thank the candidates for agreeing to participate in tonight's forum. I would like to thank the voters for attending and participating by submitting excellent questions, and I would like to thank the viewing audience as well. Remember that if we could not get to your question tonight, or if you have further questions for the candidates, we invite you to contact them directly with your concerns. Please remember to get out and vote by or on Tuesday, November 6th, as your vote truly counts.